This is the Rocket City Retirement Show with Chris Wallace. Chris loves educating people in person and over the airwaves. Whether it's retirement planning, investing, tax, or legacy, Chris prides himself in helping protect what matters to you. This is the Rocket City Retirement Show.
Hello and welcome to the Rocket City Retirement Show with certified financial planner and financial advisor Chris Wallace. He's also president of WG Financial Group. And also joining us from the firm is Graham Bauer, who is also a certified financial planner and a financial advisor at WG Financial Group. They're here again today to give us some really good advice about retirement planning. I always love it because we always get into some really good topics. I know I always learn something from these guys, and I know you do too. So here we go again. Here's the phone number, 256-937-2010. That is the way to reach out for a complimentary discovery session. You may call the number, or you can text the word visit if you prefer texting. So 256-937-2010. Text the word visit if you'd like. Remember, you can always check us out on Facebook throughout the week. Just search for WG Financial Group 256, and anything that happens in the news, any headlines that happen to do with retirement planning, Chris will make sure and have updates on that. Remember, our motto is plan, retire, and play. That is what we want for you. Find us online at WG Financial Group. And remember, this show is also available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search for the name of our show, Rocket City Retirement Show. Chris and Graham, so excited to get started.
Glad to be here, Lou Ann. I'm excited too. And I just realized as you were kind of doing the intro, you were talking about how you said something along the lines of, I always learn too.
Yeah.
We get into some great stuff. And I just realized you've been getting a lot of financial advice for free. And so
Just like everybody listening, though, right?
we're going to have to fix that. We're going to have to fix that.
No, wait a minute. I guess, yeah, you're saying I should pay you. No, we're doing this. We do this on the air. And just like our listeners, if they listen closely every weekend, they're getting some free advice, right?
I just feel like you're using me.
I'm not using you.
You're taking all these notes and going home to Bobby.
And I am taking notes. I am. You're right. I do.
And we're also paying you an exposure, Luann.
Yeah.
Like a musician. You could get a lot of other opportunities from this.
That's right.
You guys, that is so funny. Oh, my goodness. So what do you want me to do? You want me to quit?
Oh, no, we don't need you to quit.
No,
I'm
definitely
teasing.
not that.
I'm so teasing. But yeah, that's true. I'm getting some free advice here. And I'm right here. I've got the front row seat. So I feel like it does really sink in a lot for me. So when people who are listening on the radio, they're kind of doing other things, driving or doing something else, right? So yeah, you have my full attention. But I want to get started with something that we have begun to do, and that's doing the kind of the real talk on social media. And so we have something that I guess I should let you to explain. It's a social media clip, and it has to do with Social Security. So I'll let you kind of take it, Chris.
Yeah, I kind of like what you just said, actually. Real talk.
Thank you.
Did you just come up with that on the spot?
I made it up.
Luann?
I made it
Wow.
up
Okay,
earlier
well,
this week.
The advice is free from here on out.
That's right. That's what I was thinking
That's a
myself.
good title. I wish I
Okay.
came up with that.
Real talk. There you
Yeah.
go. Okay.
REEL.
Real. REEL. Yeah.
Like those Facebook reels and
Yes,
TikTok reels.
and that's what we're talking. That's what we're referring to. Yeah.
The doom scrolling that all of us get into. Just flip the videos.
Oh my gosh, I do love it though. I love to watch the ones where they show you how to make things, or to cook or something. I will get hooked on those for a good hour.
Yeah.
The recipes are never as good as they look.
Oh,
in the
they
video,
are?
So that's
You've
what
tried
I've
them?
learned.
Okay.
Yeah. It'll look so good on camera, but it's like those, Burger King burgers on the ads or,
Yes.
any restaurant.
It
You look
looks
at their food
so
and then
good.
you go in person and you get it and you're like, it doesn't look quite as good as the one in the
Yep.
commercial.
No,
And that's
I
a great
understand.
segue. The recipes aren't as good, and nor is the financial advice in a lot of these
On
reels.
these reels.
Yes, yeah.
Love it.
So the reel that we went over this week, actually, my dad sent it to me.
Oh, he
So
did. I thought it was
he
supposed to come
did.
from Graham.
So
Okay.
what happened was my dad just, ironically, just sent me this video.
Was he asking you about it?
No, he just
Oh,
sent it
okay.
to me. I'm not
Okay.
sure, but I was like, this
Okay.
guy gets on my nerves. Not my dad.
Oh.
The person in the video.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good.
the person in the video
Yeah.
gets on my nerves. So anyway, all right. So it's about Social Security, and it's this. Graham. I think he's a former portfolio manager, financial advisor, And really what he does is he bashes on financial advisors, and he's walking around outside, filming himself like they do. They just, they're
he's in the
these
woods.
he's filming himself while he's walking. And in this video, he gives Social Security advice and 3 reasons why he would claim Social Security at age 62. And one of the first things he talks about is the old trust fund is running dry and it's set to run out by 2030 and benefits are going to be cut. So that's one of the things he says. The second thing he talks about is how, that Social Security is just $1 trillion deep hole of problems. And there's several things that they are probably going to do, which is raise taxes is what he says, cut benefits, raise FRA. And then he moves on lastly that, the reason I would claim at 62 would be to go ahead and lock in my benefits while the money's still there today. And by the way, you have to live well into your 80s is what this person says, well into your 80s to make up for where you didn't claim at 62.
Right.
So Graham and I just kind of want to have some dialogue back and forth about those 3 things. And I'll kind of start us off here. The old trust fund is running dry. So that part of it is true. I mean, if you look at the data, that's absolutely 100% true. But I think Graham and I don't worry as much about that because, 20% of the U.S. population in some shape, form, or fashion is on Social Security, whether that's disability, the widow's benefit, maybe it's a child getting Social Security, a minor child getting Social Security. There's a lot of people collecting benefits. So if this trust fund runs dry, there's a whole lot of people that is going to have benefits cut, of which many of them are relying on it as a single and sole source of income. So you're talking about 25% cut. You're living on the street at that point in some cases, depending on your situation. So, Graham, I don't know how you feel about that comment. It kind of felt fearful to me that maybe this was done in a fearful way.
Well, it's all about engagement, I think, for a lot of people that post content of any kind online. And I think that the statement Social Security is going broke is a true statement. But what I would always push back on that is going broke is different than being broke. So it's not broke yet.
I like it.
And saying it's going broke is kind of implying that nothing will be done in a sense. It's sort of like if you were in an airplane and your pilot was like, the plane is going down. Are we landing the plane or is the plane crashing? Because there's definitely, a difference in the two. So saying it's going broke, mathematically speaking, it is going broke. Is the government going to let it go broke? That's what I would say. Probably not. I mean, as much as we might not like things like even, a Silicon Valley bank bailout or, things that happened back in 2008, 2009 with banks, government has a history of not letting institutions that would pretty devastate the economy go fully broke. And Social Security is probably one of the most important programs we have because of how many people are on it. So, I mean, we've talked about on the show before some of the other methods besides just slashing benefits and raising taxes can be done. But, on that note, I will concede that I do think taxes on Social Security for the currently working individuals, not taxes on benefits, but FICA taxes, will probably go up in the future. We've talked about this before. It's been a long time since they have. And between like basically when the program was created in 1990, there was a raise in FICA taxes really every like 3 to 5 years maximum. But in a lot of cases, there was a raise just every couple of years. And then we pretty much paused that since 1990. So as much as I wouldn't be excited about, having to pay a little bit more FICA taxes, I think that's a reality. I don't think it's going to double necessarily. But, if you see a 0.5, 1% raise in FICA taxes between Social Security and Medicare, that would not surprise me necessarily in the future. And then there's also things that, the average working class person would feel a little bit less, like pulling off the wage-based cap. So, you have to pay into Social Security regardless of how much you make. Everyone pays into it, but, there's that income threshold where once you're over that, none of the money over the threshold gets taxed for Social Security. So, and I believe, I haven't looked at this number in a while, but I believe that would make Social Security solvent for another like 8 or 10 years, just removing that.
Well, it depends on how much they raise it or remove it. It was just, I think at one point if they removed it, I want to say it was over like 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, if they just take it completely off
Yeah.
and don't raise it, but just remove it. So there's some other things that they can do. And I've said this many times, but I truly don't believe anything will be done about it in this administration or maybe even the next, whoever that is. I don't think any president wants to be the one, or any, Congress member, just any office wants to be the one to do something about it, because whatever they do about it is probably going to be a little unpopular to some group. But I think that there are less unpopular options than slashing benefits by 25%. That feels like a last resort to me, rather than this is the first step in doing it, just because of the need that so many people have for it and how much that would seriously affect the seniors, especially low income seniors.
Yeah. And just to bring a little clarity to something that you said a second ago, Graham, and you were talking and saying a lot of numbers and dates and stuff. And I think what you meant to say there was, and what I think came out of your mouth, if I'm remembering right, was Social Security hasn't, or since 1990, Social Security, since it started, or something along those lines. So we know it started in 1937, but since 1937 through 1990, to Graham's point, the FICA tax was increased many, many, many times. But since 1990, it really hasn't changed from 6.2. So a lot of numbers tossing around there. And I was actually at an event. Actually, I'm an executive producer on a retirement film, and I got to go to the screening of it. And there was a gentleman by the name of David Walker, and he sat on the trustee board on Social Security from like 1990 to 1995. And I was fortunate enough to be able to ask a question in front of the audience, because, at our firm, the Social Security is one of our core tax planning principles. Believe it or not, most people don't think of Social Security as a tax planning vehicle, but it is, because we know that only up to 85% of it is actually taxed or subject to tax. So you can basically get 15% that is not federally taxed. And in Alabama and Tennessee, there is no state tax on Social Security. So anyway, so I asked this question, like, what did he think they were going to do? And he told me that, when he sat on the board, the trustee board for Social Security from 1990 to 1995, now granted, that was a long time ago, but you still had the same types of conversations going on when Social Security was going to go belly up or bankrupt. And one of the things that he said, oddly enough, in which I agree with what you said, Graham, I think it makes sense to probably raise it a couple tenths of a percent, the FICA tax. But that's actually really, really unpopular, which is why I think, to your point, they don't bring it up. That's why it's not being talked about in this administration. They probably won't talk about it. In the next administration, it'll be the one that's in office at the time of it going basically taking the hero role and saying, hey, we saved Social Security. But David says that he doesn't think that they will raise the payroll tax because it's severely regressive. That was one thing. But he did talk about significantly raising the wage-based cap, which today sits at $176,100. So as you mentioned, when you make more than that, you stop paying into Social Security, which essentially from that point forward, you get a 6.2% raise. But yet you still pay into Medicare, which is another 1.45. You still pay into that. So David says that he believes that they'll raise it significantly, but not likely not to remove it, which I thought was a little strange. If you're going to raise it significantly to encompass a lot of people, just might as well just take it off. Because let's say that they raise it from 176 to, let's say they go to 450 with it. I mean, how many people, it's a low percentage, make more than $450,000 a year? You might as well just take the thing off at that point. The other thing that he talked about was looking at the benefit formula and potentially providing a higher replacement rate for people who are at or near the poverty level, and then less of a benefit for those in the upper middle class to upper income families, but not make it fully means tested. Is exactly, I actually have the recording of when I was there. My son recorded it while I was there. Not making it a fully means tested program, because then it becomes a welfare program and that would lose public support. And then one of the last things he talked about was looking at how they may calculate cost of living moving forward. Seniors versus younger individuals, their cost of living items are different than, say, like younger families. So he said at one point 77% of Congress agreed with that. And some of those we've talked about on the show before. We've actually mentioned the one thing that we haven't talked about is that not means testing, but looking at the replacement rate for people at different income brackets. So who knows exactly what's going to happen? I think the overall consensus between us at the firm is it's not going to go broke, but it may look different. And then, on this video, kind of going back to the video for a second, this individual says, in kind of a fear way of doing the video, they're going to raise taxes and cut benefits and raise FRA, all of which they could do. They technically could do all of that, except I'm not in the camp of them cutting benefits. I don't think that they're going to do that. So the last thing we'll kind of talk about here is where he states in this video that you have to live well into your 80s. And that is just absolutely, that's not true. Let's just say it that way.
For the break even, that is.
For the break even, yeah. So what this individual says is most financial advisors want you to wait until 70. So we like to get you to full retirement age because we think it makes sense to take your full benefit. If someone wants to wait till 70, that's better in a lot of ways. If you live a longer than average life expectancy, you're going to by far and away blow away what you would have gotten at 62. And the break even is generally around 78, sometimes 80 years old. It really depends on the COLA. So I ran a report before we got on air, and I just came up with an example here of two people that were 62. Husband's Social Security is at $3,500. The wife's was at $1,500. So she's going to get a little bit of spousal. And sure enough, the break even's right around that 78 to 80 years old. And their first full year of income. So if you claim early, their first full year of income is basically $58,000, and by waiting, it's like $70,000. So you're talking about a pretty substantial differential by waiting. But here's the other thing: you have more tax efficient income, which is why it's one of our core tax planning principles at the firm. It's just because of the taxation of it, but really more importantly, if you've got a situation where the demographic that we work with, the pre-retiree and the retiree, in a lot of cases, that the spouse stayed home, one of the spouses stayed home, and it was usually the wife. And by the husband waiting with a higher benefit, it protects her. So, and we've seen this time and time again where the husband predeceases and the wife is left with a higher benefit. So in our opinion, the tax planning element was not mentioned in this reel, since we're having real talk, and nor was the spousal protection benefit. So I guess what I want to highlight most of all about this benefit is this is the difference between a broker and a financial planner. So you have somebody that says, I used to be a portfolio manager and financial advisor, which, by the way, the term financial advisor is a very broad term. Like I've heard insurance people refer, even though they shouldn't. I've heard insurance people before refer to themselves as a financial advisor.
Right.
We consider ourselves as certified financial planners and financial advisors because we got to throw that in there because compliance wants us to say that. But what we do as CFPs is we're doing every type of planning. So we're looking at your insurance planning, your investment tax planning, your income planning, your investment planning. And we're looking at the plan and not just one element, which is typically what brokers will tend to look at. Graham, I don't know if you have any closing comments on any of that.
Yeah, I'll just add one more thing as kind of pertains to the COLA. I think people really don't think enough about how important, even if you have some other pensions, Social Security is from a inflation adjustment standpoint, because for most people, really, most of the time, unless you're a federal employee, that's going to be your only inflation adjusted source of income coming in. So, I mean, if you are getting a pension for, $3,000 today from a place like Boeing, we see a lot of Boeing pensions. They don't have an inflation adjustment on their pension. So $3,000 a month today, paired with your Social Security, that could be some pretty good income. But if you're in your early 60s retiring and you live to 90, is $3,000 a month going to be a lot of money 30 years from now? You'll probably spend less, but even still, I would venture to say that after 30 years of no inflation adjustment, that's not going to be nearly as much income as it was when you first started. So, I mean, I know that Social Security is not going to perfectly keep up with inflation, but, if you look at the last few years, 2022 is obviously a really gnarly year for inflation, and people got an 8.7% cost of living adjustment that were currently on Social Security. In 2023, it was 3.2%. Last year, 2.5%. I mean, there have been periods where inflation adjustments don't really come through, usually in times when inflation is really low. But I don't think you can undermine the importance of that, because if you're going to set yourself up where most of your income is Social Security, you're going to have most of your income inflation adjusted, where if most of your income is coming from other sources, it's either going to, be determined by how you're investing and market performance, or, like a non-inflation adjusted pension. And I'll add one last thing. I think that, that and it may be in his perspective, if he's, the guy that made the reel, if he's the type of person that can, I'm guessing, is retired and now just makes content on the internet, he probably did pretty well for himself. So if you made a ton of money, if you're worth millions, tens of millions, then no matter what you do with Social Security, it's not going to be at risk of running out of money through your retirement.
Correct.
But that still doesn't mean that for tax efficiency reasons, it's not going to still be a better decision to potentially wait there. So I always get a little bothered when I feel like, people will like to take shots at people in, different industries just to kind of get brownie points with people who already don't like the industry. But yeah, I totally agree that this is more of a broker advice rather than, a financial advisor / certified financial planner type of recommendation.
Yeah, you make the wrong decision on Social Security, it might cause you to go broker. So
we don't want that.
Yeah, so Graham kind of made the comment before the show. He basically says, man, he must have done all right if he's able to walk around in the woods and make videos and then post on social media. So I guess if you see me and Graham posting videos on social media of us walking around near the woods or in the woods near creeks and stuff, giving financial advice, we're doing okay. So, just to kind of wrap this up here. So Graham mentioned the COLA. So the average COLA over the last 20 years is 2.6%. That's what the average Social Security recipient's seen over the past 20 years, 2.6% COLA. So while it doesn't always keep up with what we would call the real inflation, it is an inflation-adjusted piece of income and is tax efficient. The other thing that I do want to note here, and Graham kind of touched on this, but when you turn 62, your benefit starts to grow at roughly 5 to 6% a year until you hit your full retirement age, and then it's 8% a year from your full retirement age till age 70. But when you hit 62, you also start getting the COLA applied as well. So let's say, for an example, if your Social Security benefit's growing at 6% a year, and the COLA, as Graham noted a couple of years back, was like 8.7%. Man, that's like 14, almost 15% growth on your Social Security. So, some people, I've heard other people, famous people, say you should take Social Security and invest it. Well, I mean, if you can outdo the COLA and the guaranteed on a guaranteed basis, then it might make sense. But if you were to take it, like say for a year like this year, I would say, how's that working out for you? You take it, invest it, and market's down 5 or 6%. So Social Security, again, one of our core tax planning principles at the office. It's a data-driven decision, not emotional. So that is all we have for Real Talk this week. That was a long Real Talk, by the way. I just realized we went like 22 minutes on that. So
yeah, that's okay.
So let's move into a little bit of the market stuff.
I want to get into what's going on with the market. It's going crazy right now. In a couple of days this week, it will have already happened by the time this show airs. We've got Liberation Day, as Trump is calling it, with those reciprocal tariffs. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So Graham just said pre-show also, he said tomorrow might be a bloody day in the market.
A bloody day, yeah.
So don't you think it's already priced in? And so he said, I don't know. It depends on what really goes into play. And I think that's kind of, as investors, where we're all at. Like, we hear a lot. I know there's some people, man, that voted for Trump, and they're like, well, I voted for this, but I didn't vote for this. And because we're seeing a lot of stuff right now, and there's a lot of things being said. But, tomorrow, as you noted, Luann, the reciprocal tariffs are supposed to go into place. And I read somewhere online that I think there's a projected like $6 billion in revenue for reciprocal tariffs. And I'm all for that. I mean, if the country charges us, we should charge them, reciprocation. So. But I think it's some of this other, I don't want to call it gouging, because I don't want to be that person that says that, because I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And really, frankly, none of us know what goes on behind the government curtain, if you will. But I think just the way that the message is delivered, I think, is the problem that I personally have. It's, if you want to do it, that's fine. Can we please show some data as to why we're going to charge, 25% on autos coming to the U.S., which, again, I'm not disagreeing with. Just communicate, say it in a professional manner, And can we please provide some data? Like we just went through a ton of data on Social Security and why not to do this, or why not to collect early. Do the same thing. Just communicate it to the American people. Use charts and graphs, stuff that's really easy to understand. What do we think is going to happen? I don't know. Graham said it could be bloody tomorrow, which will be Wednesday, which by the time you hear this episode, it will already air.
Yeah.
I think most of this is probably already priced in. So I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I tend to think it'll be a less volatile day. I think Graham says it could be bloody. We'll see who's right on this. We'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, we can't drive anyone's decisions here because it will already have happened by the time you're hearing this. So.
Yes, it will. And it may change 3 times between now and the time the show airs.
Yeah,
Right?
and I agree that on the institutional side, I think it's probably mostly priced in, but just with how fluid everything is, I mean, it could start out as a 25% tariff on some countries and be a 50% by the end of the day. Yeah. So it's so fluid and moving that I think for, the retail investor, just your average investor, it's easier for them to get spooked. But yeah, I guess we'll know by the next time we record.
Yeah, no, we will. We definitely, we'll know something by the next time we record.
Yeah, we will.
And so I think we have, I think we have a good 6 to 9 months left of this. And here's exactly why I say this. I believe that Trump knows he holds the key, or let's say he holds the Trump card.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what you'd say if you were playing cards, right? You hold the Trump card. And the Trump card is he can back off on some of these things, just like with a snap of a finger, can say, you know what, we're not going to do this and stop, and the markets will react. I believe that he knows that. And I think I've mentioned this before. We'll go over it one more time before we head off into the first part of the show, or the ending of the first part of the show, I should say. I believe that they're working on a 2-year clock. I believe that they're worried, about Congress potentially turning over, at the midterms. And then he's not running on reelection. So he is literally trying to get everything done as quickly as possible. And I really think that they're just running everything through as fast as they can. But I also know, or at least this is the way I feel, and if you're listening and you agree with me, great. If you don't, that's okay too. I believe that at some point he's going to realize I'm close enough to the midterms and things are still volatile and we haven't got everything done that we said we were going to get done, but we got a lot of it done. So I think I'm going to back off on this. And so let's just say, for an example, he's doing the 25% auto tariffs. Let's just say he lets that go on for another 3 months and he doesn't quite get to where he wants to be or where he thinks the U.S. should be. He can drop those in a heartbeat. And I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is my opinion again, that he would do that in a heartbeat. So the market would fire back up because, many people look at their 401k balances and then associate that with the sitting president, which we tend to disagree with. But in this case, with what's happening right now, I do believe that the markets are reacting to news that's coming out of the Oval Office at this point. So I believe he holds the Trump card. That's why I say we probably got another 6 months of this stuff to go on, the volatility, and then I think things will really start to settle out. Again, my opinion. So what do? Stay invested. Don't make any knee-jerk reactions because a sentence gets released into the press and the markets can react and start to bounce back. So it's really about building that plan, sticking with it. Even if you're retiring this year, your federal government, you're taking the VERA or you're looking to retire at the end of the year, this is what we do all the time. Look at these types of situations. We want to build a plan and we want to stick to it. And that's my advice to everybody that's retired or if they are looking to retire. So this is the end of the first segment. If you're listening to this on the way to church, you want to hear the whole episode, hop out to Apple Podcast or Spotify and pick up the whole show there. Hope everybody's having a great week, and you can give us a call at 256-937-2010 to start your retirement planning process. Go through what we call our right retirement process, 256-937-2010.
If lingering doubts like, have I saved enough? Or will my retirement funds endure? Are on your mind, it's time to consult with Chris Wallace. Text VISIT to 256-937-2010. That's 256-937-2010 to book your appointment and get the answers you need.
Quarters, just 25 cents. That's hardly anything, right? But Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial see quarters a little differently. A quarter is a lot when it's a quarter of your retirement savings. Now, do you want to pay 25% or more in taxes during your retirement? Well, Chris can create a plan to help address that. Now, if the only time you think about taxes is when you file them, you don't have a tax strategy. But it's not too late to get one with the help from Chris Wallace. So act now to make sure you're not paying a quarter, dime, or even a penny more than you should. Call Chris Wallace and his team at WG Financial at 256-937-2010 to schedule your personalized tax strategy session. A quarter saved is a quarter earned. Call 256-937-2010 now. That's 256-937-2010. Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Firm may not give tax advice.
Market difficulties can be unsettling, but your retirement plan doesn't have to be. Take control by calling Chris Wallace at 256-937-2010.
And thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Rocket City Retirement Show. I'm Luann Fulmer here with Chris Wallace, president of WG Financial Group. He's a certified financial planner and financial advisor, along with Graham here on our show, also a certified financial planner and financial advisor at WG Financial Group. And our motto is plan, retire, and play. And when we plan, we want to make sure that we plan for the M&M money, right? We want to make sure that you have the making memories money that Chris has just recently mentioned. And Chris, I love what you said about that. You know, it reminded you of your family sitting around out to eat with your family and extended guests and making memories with that retirement money. And that's what we want our retirees to do, right?
You know what? I love that you remembered the M&M money.
I did remember it. I did. Yes.
I actually got a text from Graham's dad today.
Oh, did you?
Did I tell you he texted me about the M&M money?
I
So I'll just read it. I'll give your dad a shout out on the air.
So yeah, he listens to the podcast version on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Oh, he does.
Get the plug in there.
Oh, well, no wonder he just. So today at 11:45 this morning, he texted me. Yeah.
Every time you guys say Apple Podcast, I think you're saying apple pie. And it makes me think of apple pie.
Well, it is.
I would love to have some warm apple pie with a la mode. A la modi. That's what we used to say. Apple pie a la modi as a joke. But yeah, that sounds very good right now. But anyway, okay. So I do want to mention your lunch and learns, you guys. This is kind of cool. I love how you reach out to businesses. So if someone is listening and you're the owner, let's say a president or HR manager, Chris and Graham, they would welcome the opportunity to come to your employees, your business, and hold a lunch and learn. It's complimentary. Chris, you've done this before. You do it right here in the Huntsville area. Just kind of a way to help your employees better understand some of the complex things in retirement that we talk about on our show, and they can certainly discuss things that you might want to highlight for your employees. So we want to make sure you are on the path to a successful retirement. All you have to do is call our number. Again, that number 256-937-2010. Schedule the complimentary lunch and learn for your employees. So, okay, I wanted to get that business out of the way as well. That's kind of a fun thing. Have you guys started doing many of these yet?
So we haven't had any in the past few months. Okay. So yeah, if you're a small business owner, even if you're a big business owner, I mean, we'll come in and talk to your retirees and just really talk about things that they should be doing to prep themselves for retirement. I think the key thing about, our firm is we have a pretty diverse mix of, ages when it comes to advisors. We have 3 certified financial planners on staff. And myself personally, I'm in that pre-retirement zone. So Graham's on the younger end. And on my side, I'm on the older end. I'll be 52 in May. So I'm doing a lot of the things right now currently myself that I'm setting clients up with and doing, in their own retirement plans to prep them. So I think you have somebody that's, raising kids that are in college, paying down debt, which we pay down most of our debt. We're saving in our retirement plans. We're doing the HSA plans. We have to make decisions. I have to make decisions on corporate healthcare insurance, and then also for ourselves personally. So, in doing these lunch and learns, you get some real life experience and conversation from people that are walking that same journey that you are.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so shall we go ahead and get started then in what I have here? This is just regarding people and their savings people who have like high net worth savings. So listen to this. According to Fortune, many wealthy retirees are living like they're scraping by, even though they have millions in the bank. So this is kind of weird. So people who, have 7-figure savings are just being cautious about spending their money. And why is that?
Well, I would argue that some of this is not necessarily being cautious, but Jennifer and I had this discussion a while back. I think if you're not careful, then your life will adjust to your income. So you'll get what's called like lifestyle creep. So you make more money, you spend more money is essentially what I'm saying here. That's why we're big advocates of getting the money really out of your hands and into an account that's harder to get to, i.e. a retirement savings plan, because if you make more money, you're generally going to find a way to spend more money. Graham has said it before on the show. I can't remember if he said it or I said it. Who came up with it doesn't really matter. It's something that we say that income covers up sin. And so the more money you make, the more sinful spending or senseless spending that you're doing, and your income covers it up. Now, that's different than making memories money. So that's different than the M&M money. The M&M money is there in retirement for you to enjoy with your family while you're here to make those memories today. The reckless spending, I think, is, what I've seen tons of wealthy people that come into the office and they're very income rich and they are spending really more than their savings. But I think this article kind of touches on something a little bit different. It's just basically people that are afraid to spend money. And that is that's a reality. I mean, you save the money and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose it. I already went through this in 2008. And so you do find people that have these big, large bank accounts and savings accounts where they're just really cautious about spending the money.
Now, what about this? Recently published research found that many retirees are withdrawing just 2.1% of their savings annually, and that's way below the traditional 4% rule. Graham, I'll give that one to you to react to.
Yeah, we see this, a good bit of the time. And I think it obviously really ties back to the first question that you guys went over just a second ago. There's definitely a big disparity, I would say, when we talk about spending within wealthy people, I would say, because, to Chris's point, it's very common nowadays for a traditionally wealthy person who is wealthy from an income perspective to spend a lot of money. I mean, for example, right now in the U.S., 50% of consumer spending is done by people making over $250,000 a year, which is a much smaller portion of the overall population. So spending is always a little bit top heavy. But in retirement, these could be people who are making $250,000 a year, but in retirement, they're probably not generating that much income, even if they have a pretty substantial savings. So I think it does lead people to look at that account and just be really fearful of seeing it go down at all and say, okay, well, maybe I'll pull off a little bit of the interest if it does well this year, or I'm just not going to touch it at all. And I do think that, there are times in retirement to be a little bit more cautious about how much you're withdrawing. I wouldn't advise people to be taking 8 to 10% of their portfolio every year of their retirement. That's not going to be sustainable.
Some people say you can do that. We won't name names.
Yeah, that's not the real talk for this week, but maybe you can go back to an old episode for that one.
Yep.
But in that, you still want to, I think, be strategic about, taking enough that you can enjoy your lifestyle as well. Because, I've had people come in who, their current clients or their prospects coming in and they've done really, really well saving for themselves. And once they've retired, they have their Social Security, maybe they have a small pension, and they kind of spend that and they don't really touch their savings. A lot of times what we'll do in a situation like that, or what I'll do, is just say, okay, well, let's try to start taking a little bit more that we'll just, send out to you. We'll try it for a few months. To see, does that make you a little bit more comfortable to spend a little bit more? Because I know myself personally, and I've said this before, I look way too much at just my bank account as, how much money I have. Obviously, you have investment accounts, you have an HSA, your retirement plans. But for a lot of us, we just look at our bank account and we say, okay, well, I can't really afford to do that because I only have, on average, let's say $10 to $30,000 in my bank. I'm not going to go buy a new car. Well, you could have $10 or $30,000 in your bank, but 2 million sitting in a retirement plan in your investment account. And, that's money at a certain point in life you're either going to have to start accessing and living off of, treating yourself a little bit, or just leave a really big inheritance to your beneficiaries. So if that's not a goal, then I think a good exercise is to start saying, okay, I'm going to try to take at least, 3-4% and just see if I can spend that, see if I can find ways to, okay, I want something, I'm just going to go get it. We're going to, go fly somewhere. Maybe we're going to fly business class or first class instead of economy, to just make those lifestyle changes. So again, if inheritance isn't a big goal, you don't end up just leaving all the money to your kids and never enjoying any of the savings that you built up.
Yeah, you want to enjoy it with them, which is why we came up with M&M money.
Exactly.
Now, so here's a thought as well. So just to kind of touch back on a couple of things here. I believe that there's going to be many people that's going to wake up in their 80s and they're going to look back and they're going to think, man, I should have spent more money when we could have. They're going to look at their spouse and say, we could have been traveling. We could have been doing, look at all this money we have left. And now we don't feel like it. So now this is just going to pass on as generational wealth. With that's fine if that's a goal. But, I've talked about my grandparents on the show and how I remember going on vacations with them, and they weren't anything like this big lavish vacation. It was just I spent time with them, and they were, took us to Panama City Beach, which is, where we would go as a kid. And I thought that was like, what would be the Caribbean to me now. Panama City was like the place to go, when I was a kid. So my grandparents would take me, my dad's family would take me to the lake. And to be honest, it was really more about the time that was spent there than it was any of the money. I didn't look at it as a money thing, but let's face it, it takes money to get to the campground and do your camping. It takes money to get to Panama City. It takes money to go anywhere and do things these days. And that's why we mentioned last week the M&M money and making sure that you're enjoying that with your family. But here's a thought. I have a few families that are really, one of their goals is legacy. They want to make sure that they leave a certain amount of money. And in one of my previous meetings with a client, he sat down, and this guy is highly intelligent, but he's also highly family man as well. So he looks at me and he says, "Hey, Chris, I'm struggling a little bit with spending this money that I have because I want it to go to my son and to take care of my grandkids. So I almost feel guilty about spending money." So there's two types of psychological battles that happen with people. And that is one, when you retire and you're like, oh my gosh, do I have enough? And we have plenty of those clients. Do I have enough? Will it last? And I'm afraid to spend it just because I'm afraid. And then there's this gentleman who is, I have enough. I have plenty of money, but now I'm spending really my kids' inheritance. So one of the things that I spoke to him about in our last meeting was you have to give yourself permission that it's okay. It is okay to spend some of that money now to start making some of those memories today. And he said, well, what if I do this? And I was like, well, what is this? And he said, what if I get a joint life insurance policy on me and my wife so that I can kind of give myself permission to spend, and then knowing when I pass away, that's tax-free. But yeah, to your point, all of that money would go to your son tax-free. And he says, I kind of feel like with what I want to do in terms of legacy for him, that will help me give myself permission to spend, because I can spend the money. And even if I spent the dollars all the way down to zero, there's still going to be that tax-free life insurance policy that's going to go towards him. So for him, that's what we did. We set something up like that just because it helped him. And it's not right for everybody. Some people listen to the show and say, I would never do that. Well, that's great. That's the unique thing about what we do. Everybody is different. And that's why when we're meeting with families and having these conversations, you try to dive deep into not just the financial side, but there's a lot of emotions with money. And, there's you have to kind of extract some of that out to try to understand why people are making the decisions, that they're making in retirement. And it all drives back to kind of what their long-term goals and objectives are. And then it really kind of, evolves around some of their emotions as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, we've had, I'm sure you've had people mention this to you before, but I've had people ask before, in an initial meeting process when we're kind of going through our discovery session and learning more about clients, we'll ask questions about, their history with money, their feelings towards money, their feelings towards inheritance with their kids and all those different things. And occasionally people will be like, why are you asking about this? Because you're not just asking, what am I currently invested in? And, how much? And the big reason for that is the fact that your psychology plays so much into obviously who you are as an investor, but just how you feel about money and how you're going to approach your own retirement. It's in a lot of ways, I think once a saver, always kind of a saver. And it's good for us to know so we can try to, maybe push you out of your comfort zone a little bit. So you do enjoy, your retirement, do maybe break some of those molds, because it's just more than just knowing, oh, they have this much in savings. This is how much they're getting in pensions. It always just helps to know how to approach people with their history and their feelings about money and their own retirement.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Graham. Once a saver, always a saver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that habit that I think we get into as we're saving money. I now find myself, getting into that routine where, like, you've heard me talk about this on the show before. I was not a saver early on. I was a spender. I knew how to spend and run up a credit card. But nowadays, I have some money in savings, and there are things that I could buy, but I'm like, why do I want to buy that? Why, that's just for pleasure. It's a worldly thing that I'm going to tie up money in just to give me pleasure. And that's really not where I want to be seeking pleasure. And I don't want to pull money out of savings because, like you mentioned, your bank account, you look at your bank account, Graham, I do the same thing. I'm like, I don't want to see my savings balance drop. In some ways, we have clients that have SWAN money, SWAN, SWAN. Sleep well at night money. So I have my sleep well at night money too. And I don't want to see it drop. And then, also to spend it on something that is just going to bring what I would call like temporary pleasure. I'm not going to do that. Now, you get the kids around the dinner table and we're out to dinner and dinner's $200. I'm totally fine with spending it. I'll spend it all day, every day. Well, not every day. I'll spend it all day, every month to get everybody around the dinner table and have that memory and that conversation. So, good discussion around that. But I think, to kind of wrap up this whole section here is, people are going to wake up and they're going to find out they didn't spend enough money in retirement and when they can. And that's why I think there's value in working with somebody, a financial planner. I think some people look at us and think, oh, you just charge for managing our money. It's like, not really. I mean, yes, but there's a lot more that goes into this than just, I'm doing my little quotation, just managing your money. Some of it's managing your emotions for some of our clients. It's like, hey, man, calm down. You're good. Like, here's your plan. You're good. Here's your report card. Here's your one-page plan that we do. So anyway.
Yeah, creating a plan is huge. And I think it's great to get some guidance. And that's why Chris and Graham are here today. If you're concerned about what you're doing for retirement, they're here to help you. All you have to do is pick up the phone, put this number in, 256-937-2010. You may call or text the word visit to get a complimentary discovery visit. Okay. It's complimentary. I can't speak. And then remember, our website is wgfinancialgroup.com. Head there. You can find out even more about Chris and Graham and our awesome team at WG Financial Group. So we are so happy you're spending part of your day with us today. This is the Rocket City Retirement Show. And right now I want to talk about the challenges, the tax challenges that our retirement income is going to face, guys. Okay. So I guess, let's just talk about taxes and what makes it such a critical concern for those who have accumulated a significant amount of savings.
Well, you've seen Charlotte's Web, right?
Yeah.
As a kid, right?
Yeah.
Spider weaves this big old web.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of like the IRS. And what the IRS has done is they have created this incredibly large spider web of taxes. So, and I'll kind of walk through what I mean by that. So you have your marginal rates. So we know we have the 10, the 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, and 37. I had to think about that for a second. But buried for retiree that's north of 63, buried within the marginal brackets are the IRMA brackets. And there's I think there's 5 or 6. Let's see here. There's 5 levels of IRMA. So inside your marginal bracket, you have the 5 levels of IRMA buried in there. And then buried within that, you also have something called the net investment income tax levels buried in there. So $250 for a married couple, $200 for a single couple. And that's where you pay an additional 3.8% tax on interest and capital gains earned when you make more than $250,000. And then on top of that, you have the capital gains brackets kind of woven in there at 0, 15, and 20%. So the IRS and Congress, they've created this, what I like to call this spider web tax situation, that when you cross these certain thresholds, you may pay more in marginal. And if you cross over the wrong IRMA bracket, then you may pay more for your Medicare Part B premium and your Part D, as in dog drug premium, as well. So you have to be careful because we'll get caught in this spider web of taxes. Now, when it comes to IRMA, we have to start being a little bit careful of that in 2020, or not 2023. They're going to look back at 2023. So if you're 65 now, they're looking back at when you were 63. So if you're in your 63rd year right now, you have to start paying attention to, especially if you're retired, you have to start paying attention to how you're pulling money out of retirement plans, because you may pull, I'll make a wild example here. You may pull $300,000 out because you just want to pay your house off. Well, guess what? That's going to throw you way up in the IRMA brackets. And probably at that case, it's probably going to put you 2 or 3 levels up, and you're going to pay increased Medicare premiums for at least 1 year. They do look back on a rolling 2 years, but that starts at age 63. So you have to be aware of the spider web. So I know you have some questions here, Leanne, but that's just kind of, I wanted to, as we get into talking about taxes, this is how the IRS, captures you in a spider web. Now, I just mentioned the retiree. It also works for the pre-retiree. Mm-hmm. These brackets exist, except for the IRMA brackets. Every bracket that I just mentioned in that spider web exists until, except for the IRMA brackets, and that doesn't really start until about age 63 for a lot of people. Okay. Not a lot of people. It starts for everybody.
Yeah. So do you want to go through the points there, or have you touched on enough the points about why it's so concerning?
Well, those are, I'll kind of touch on a couple things here, in addition to the brackets, and Graham, feel free to jump in on anything that I may miss out on. So number one, when you do your taxes, usually as a retiree, you don't itemize anymore because of the tax code is, what it is today, set to expire at the end of 2025. Many retirees aren't going to have the ability to itemize. So how you pull income in retirement is really important. The withdrawals you take are really important. This is why earlier in the show, in the very first half of the show, we talked about Social Security and why that is one of our core tax strategies at the office, because only up to 85% of it is taxed. So using that as a strategy, being strategic in how you pull money out. You don't have as many deductions. You got to be aware of the IRMA premiums. And then, of course, you get down to 73, 75 years old. Now you got to start pulling required minimums. I mean, you're talking about getting hung up in that web pretty good of the spider web that the IRS has kind of woven there.
Okay. Now, I want to bring up our national debt. We talk about this a lot.
No, don't do that. Don't bring them.
Hey, we have to face it. And it's maddening, actually, but it's almost 37 trillion, growing so fast. Let's talk about that and how this should impact the way that people think about their retirement tax planning, please.
Yeah, I'm not one of these negative Nellies that'll say, the marginal rate's going to go to 90%, like what it was, after World War II. But I just have to imagine if Congress can't get their spending under control, that we have no choice but to see taxes go up. I don't see how it's possible to get the spending under control and get the debt paid off. And I've said this before, a lot of people out there listening say, well, Trump's going to tariff, our way out of debt. No, there's not enough stuff to tariff to get us out of this kind of debt. This is going to be like some radical changes. It's going to take work from DOGE. It's going to take some tariff. It's also going to take the government spending less. And interest rates dropping would help too, because the cost to take care of the debt right now is just astronomical. So I think the word on the street is we're spending about $3 billion with a B dollars per day with a D on interest on the debt. $3 billion per day.
Ridiculous.
So I just have to imagine that in the future that we're probably going to see taxes go up. I just can't look you in the eye and tell you how much. And I think that's why it's critical for those to think about today's taxes and how they're, going to handle their income as they move forward, because we just don't know what that's going to look like, say 10, 15 years down the road.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think that people grasp in some sense how massive of a debt pool it is. And we've said before, to not be all fear-mongering about this. Pretty much every developed nation on the planet has a very similar problem right now. I mean, the world has become very globalized in how we do trade and how we manufacture and how we develop. So, if you look at problems like national debt, housing prices, inflation, those are problems that you will find in the US. You'll find them in Canada. You'll find them in Germany. You'll find them in China. You'll find them in Japan and Australia. So there really aren't any countries out there doing a perfect job of it. So I think what gives me some comfort in, all of it is the fact that in a large part, there really isn't it's not like the US is doing so absolutely horrible and the rest of the world is just crushing it on national debt and have absolutely none. So we do need to make radical changes because it's totally unsustainable. But yeah, I think that's going to be, a little painful at some point, but probably more on the tax side than anything, going forward. But do we know when that's going to happen? Similar to raising, FICA taxes, no one wants to be the Congress or the president that raises taxes. I mean, it is very politically popular to cut taxes. It's very unpopular to raise taxes. So it's one of those things where it's hard to say when it's going to be, because I would think that politicians would like to kick the can down the road as long as they possibly can. But as we do that, we borrow money just to fund our spending, yearly at this point. So we're at least getting us to a balanced point where we're not adding to it just to add to it would be great. But I think for the average retiree, I think that's kind of where some of this question was going to. Similar to the conversation about tariffs, I don't think it's cause to just believe that the U.S. is going belly up and the dollar will be worth nothing in a few years, and you need to go, stuff all your money under your mattress and move everything to precious metals. I still think you have to be measured with your approach. You still have to be thinking long term. Because, as a country, we've obviously faced a lot of economic instability in the past. We've had wars, and, we've had enough ingenuity to work our way out of it over time. But, it is a slow process.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of, when we talk about the debt, one of the biggest things I think that really hurt us was the COVID crisis and all of the money that got, flushed into the system there. Yeah. That, personally, I believe we still need to spend some of that money out of the system. It needs to burn its way out of the system. In order for us to get back to some level of normalcy. I think that the economy really to some degree is, I think that it's still out of whack a little bit in terms of being able to look at it, just because there's still a lot of additional cash. And if you look at the consumer spending charts still today, I mean, consumer spending, people are still spending money. Now, granted, 30-ish% of people out there today are working like 2 jobs, because there's so many little influencer jobs or, DoorDash or whatever. You got a lot of people working, 2 jobs just to continue to, to do their lifestyle. But at the end of the day, we have a spending problem here in the U.S. and, how we pay for that is really with taxes, because that's what really funds the government. So I think as we kind of wrap this show up, the importance of, tax planning, understanding how to pull money out, how to pay legally, like we don't do anything, under the table, but how do we legally pay less in taxes? We're not CPAs or anything like that, but we do understand how to pull money out. As a CFP, you go through the tax courses, you understand how money is taxed, and really building that plan that helps you do that. And maybe even looking at, Roth conversion strategies. Are there gifting strategies we can look at? That's all part of the plan. So I mentioned earlier in the show, Graham, that I think a lot of people just kind of look at us and say, oh, well, you financial advisors charge X. Well, we're looking at your giving. We're looking at how can we help you save taxes. We're looking at the whole plan. And that, ultimately helps, tends to help families out when you're addressing the pillars that we address, the retirement income, the investment, the taxes, and the estate planning. That's, an overall financial plan. And we feel like if you're looking at those 4 pillars, then, you're going to have a pretty, your chance of success in retirement goes up. We can't guarantee that, of course, but the chances increase if you're addressing the right things in retirement as you move forward. So if you'd like to give us a call, set up your discovery session, you can do that by calling 256-937-2010. That's 256-937-2010. Hope everybody has an awesome and blessed week. And remember to serve every person in every situation with a servant heart.
Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA. Neither AEWM nor advisors providing investment advisory services through AEWM recommend or facilitate the buying or selling of precious metals.
Investment advisory products and services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business WG Insurance Services. WG Financial Group is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. Insurance products offered by WG Insurance Services are not subject to investment advisor requirements. AEWM and WG Insurance Services are not affiliated companies. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the issuing carrier. This radio show is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. WG Financial Group is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by WG Financial Group. This radio show is a paid placement.